The Gatekeeper's Sin. Do you want to know the most ironic thing about death? It isn't that terrifying moment when your heart beats its last rhythm. It isn't even the crushing silence as the voices of those you love fade into nothing. No. The most ironic thing about death is that it's a thoroughly bureaucratic affair. At least, that's how it was back when I still sat behind the desk. But let me start at the beginning. My name was, well, it doesn't matter anymore. They called me the Gatekeeper, though my official title was Soul Processing Administrator, Class 2. I worked at the office, capital O, situated exactly halfway between heaven and hell. Picture a vast, grey, open-plan floor where echoing footsteps dissolve into the same faint hum you'd hear in an airport departure lounge. Fluorescent lights that never quite illuminate anything properly. The smell of coffee left standing too long, mixed with something vaguely antiseptic, and always, the rustle of papers. The office had existed since the Great Reconciliation. You won't find that in any holy book. They all got it wrong, you see. In the beginning, heaven and hell weren't locked in some cosmic battle. They walked hand in hand, two sides of the same eternal coin. Souls passed freely between the realms, their paths determined solely by the fundamental truth of their existence. But then came the quarrel. Nobody remembers how it started. Maybe an angel made a snide remark about the smell of sulfur. Maybe a demon tracked mud across heaven's marble floors. Whatever it was, the balance trembled, and for one horrifying moment, the entire cosmic order threatened to collapse. That's when the office was established. Neutral ground, a place of judgment where every soul would be processed according to the ancient protocols. And that's where I came in. Every morning, though morning is a relative concept in a place with no sun, I arrived at my desk, straightened my tie, yes, we wore ties in the bureaucracy of the afterlife, and prepared to process the day's arrivals. The souls came in a steady stream, confused, frightened, sometimes indignant. There must be some mistake, they'd say. I'm not supposed to be dead yet. There was never a mistake. Trust me, I checked. Several times. The paperwork was always flawless. My work was really quite simple. Each soul approached my desk, and I asked it a single question. Just one. The question was different for every soul, drawn from a great leather-bound book whose pages renewed themselves fresh each morning. The rules were elegantly simple. Tell the truth, and your soul would rise to heaven. Unless the deeds of your life were so monstrous that not even honesty could save you. Lie to me, and the gates of hell would swing wide. And for the souls, that was the whole of the law. But I was bound by another rule, older than the office itself. A spirit of judgment must covet nothing material. We who weigh souls may want nothing of what souls leave behind, not gold, not memory, not a single object from the world of the living. Covet mammon, and you fall. So it was written. To me it was just a line in the ancient protocols, as remote and self-evident as the commandment not to covet your neighbor's possessions. You don't think about rules like that. You don't need to, until you break them. But back to the souls. You'd be amazed how many couldn't manage that one simple task, telling the truth. Take Mrs. Henderson, a lovely woman truly. Baked cookies for her grandchildren every Sunday, volunteered at the animal shelter. She stood before my desk wringing her translucent hands, her soul still wearing the hospital gown she'd died in. Mrs. Henderson, I said, scanning the book. Your question is, did you forgive your sister before you died? Her face, or what remained of it in her spirit form, crumpled. Yes, of course I did. The book's pages turned red. A lie. Mrs. Henderson, I said gently, because whatever you might think, I wasn't heartless. Not then. You must answer truthfully. She broke into sobs. Souls weep differently than the living, more like a shimmer passing through them. I couldn't. She took Harold from me 50 years ago. 50 years I carried that grudge, and I couldn't let it go, not even at the end. The book's pages turned white. Truth. The elevator behind her chimed softly, doors sliding open to reveal a golden interior. Up she went. That was the beauty of the system. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest about your imperfections. For centuries, yes, centuries, time moves strangely when you deal in eternity. This system worked flawlessly. I sat at my desk, asked my question, and sent the souls on their way. Up or down, truth or lie, heaven or hell. Clean, simple, efficient. But you know what they say about all good things. It started on what I'll call a Tuesday, because it felt like a Tuesday. That particular flavor of mundane tedium only Tuesdays can achieve. The soul standing before my desk was different. Mr. Marcus Webb, age 47, cause of death, massive coronary during a particularly stressful board meeting. He wore an expensive suit even in death, and his soul carried that peculiar sheen successful businessmen often did, a kind of polished emptiness. Mr. Webb, as the book revealed his question. Did you love your wife? He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd closed too many deals to be rattled by a simple question. Of course I did. The book stayed neutral. Not quite truth, not quite lie. That happened sometimes with complicated emotions. And then the decision fell to me. It was the one discretion the protocols allowed. When the book fell silent, I weighed the soul myself. And looking at Mr. Webb, that polished emptiness, a man who seemed never to have loved anything but winning, I had already made up my mind. Down. I was opening my mouth to say it when he reached into his pocket. Listen, he said, and drew out something that made me blink. It was a stapler, a simple silver stapler. But it was also the first earthly object I'd seen a soul carry in 300 years. Usually, material possessions didn't survive the transition. I know how these things work. Heaven, hell, judgment, all of it. And I know you're hesitating. But what if we could make this easier for both of us? I stared at the stapler. It gleamed with a light that seemed impossible in the fluorescent haze of the office. Mr. Webb, I don't think you understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. He set the stapler on my desk with a soft click. You ask questions all day. Process souls, send them up or down. Tedious work, I imagine. But this? He nudged the stapler toward me. This is from Earth. Real chrome, a real spring mechanism. When was the last time you held something real? My hand moved toward it before I caught myself. Mr. Webb, this is extremely irregular. Irregular, he laughed. We are discussing afterlife logistics while I stand here dead. I think we're well past irregular. Just take it. Send me up. What's the harm? One soul. What's one soul in the grand scheme? You must process thousands. 10,000 a day, I heard myself say. Exactly. You're a rounding error, a statistical anomaly. And for that tiny, insignificant deviation, you get something real. Something that remembers what it was like to be alive. My fingers closed around the stapler. It was cool. Solid in a way nothing in the office was solid. It had weight. It had purpose. And in that moment who had already decided to send this man down, turned my eyes to the elevator and spoke the words that should never have been spoken. "You may go up, Mr. Webb." I waited for thunder. I waited for the father's voice to crack through the office, for the floor to open and swallow us both. But nothing came. Only the soft chime of the elevator, the slide of golden doors, and Mr. Webb's smile. The smile of a man who just closed a deal. "A pleasure doing business," he said, and he rose to a place he hadn't earned. The elevator doors closed. Silence settled back over the office, the same faint hum as always. No judgment, no punishment. Just me and a stapler in my hand, and the knowledge of what I'd just done. I should have thrown it in the bin right then. Should have cried out to the father, confessed, begged forgiveness. But the silence was so complete, and the stapler so real, and somewhere a small, terrible voice whispered, "You got away with it." I put the stapler in my drawer. It was my first sin, and my worst, though it would be a long time before I understood that. I swore something to myself that day. I would never again sell heaven. Never again move a soul from its rightful path. Mr. Webb had been a lapse, a moment of weakness, and it would not happen again. I kept the stapler. I can't explain why, but I promised myself it meant nothing, just an object in a drawer, no harm to anyone. But word travels. The dead talk, you see. Even before they arrive here, they talk. And word of Mr. Webb spread through the realm of the living in that mysterious way forbidden knowledge always spreads. Like water finding cracks in a dam, like whispers in a library, growing louder with each retelling. The gatekeeper cannot resist the mammon of the world. Souls began arriving with objects. At first they came to buy a place for themselves. A businessman offering his gold watch to go up, though he'd earned down. A politician spreading the contents of his pockets across my desk like a deck of cards. I turned them away, every one of them, harder than I needed to, because Webb's guilt still burned. I would not sell heaven to selfishness, not ever again. That much I held to, and it held. But then came a different kind of request. Not a selfish bribe, but something I had no defense against. Her name was Sarah Chen, age 28. Cause of death, a car accident on her wedding day. Still in her wedding dress, her soul shimmered with fresh trauma and unfulfilled dreams. As she approached my desk, I could taste her desperation like copper in the air. "Miss Chen," I said, scanning the book, "your question is, did you truly forgive your father for being absent in your childhood?" Her face crumpled. It was a hard question. They'd been getting harder lately, I'd noticed. As though the book knew about the temptations and was testing everyone more severely. She began to cry. "I wanted to. I tried to. But—" "The truth, Miss Chen." "No," she whispered. "I never forgave him. I said I had, but I never." The book's pages turned white. Truth. The elevator chimed. The golden doors opened. She had earned her place. Of that there was no doubt. But she didn't step inside. Instead, she drew a pocket watch from the folds of her wedding dress. Gold, intricately engraved, it caught the fluorescent light and turned it into something warm, something alive. "I know I can't buy my own place," she said, setting the watch on my desk. "And I don't need to. I told the truth, and I'm going up. But I'm going up alone. We were married this morning. For 1 hour I was a wife, and then the car came. He's still down there, my husband. And he isn't a good man in the way your book measures. He's done things, bitter things, and he'd never give the right answers. When his time comes, you'll send him down. I know that. Miss Chen, I can't. This was my grandfather's. Her voice broke. Real gold. Real. Take it. And when my husband one day stands here, where I'm standing now, open the golden doors for him. Whatever his answers may be, let us be together again when that time comes. Please, that's all I want. I stared at the watch. Its ticking was the first new sound I'd heard in the office in decades. Here, everything hummed or rustled or chimed, but nothing ticked. Nothing marked time because time meant nothing here. But this watch insisted that seconds mattered, that moments had weight, that time was precious and fleeting and real. This was exactly what I had sworn to refuse. She was asking me to bend a judgment, not her own, but another's, a man not yet brought before me, a bribe on behalf of someone else. I should have said no. After Webb, I should have said no. But she wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for love. And the watch in my hand was so warm, so real. He doesn't deserve it, I said quietly. And even as the words left me, I knew I was losing. No, Sarah Chen said. But I love him. Doesn't that count for something? The book would have said no. The book weighed deeds, not love. But in that moment, I wasn't looking at the book. I was looking at the watch. Go, I said. Your husband, when his time comes, the doors will open for him. I promise. Her tears were like starlight now. She set the watch carefully on my desk, her fingers lingering a moment on its surface. Then she walked into the elevator, and as the doors closed, she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen in centuries. I told myself this wasn't like Webb. Webb had bought his own salvation out of selfishness. Sarah Chen had bought love, a reunion. It was mercy, wasn't it? But the watch was in my drawer, beside the stapler. And the truth I refused to look at was this. I didn't take it for love. I took it because I couldn't let it go. It was my second sin, and it would not be the last. The trickle became a flood. Words spread with impossible speed, and it had sharpened into a cruel truth. The gatekeeper cannot resist the mammon of the world, they whispered. Bring him something beloved, something real and precious, and he'll grant your wish. A place above, a reunion, whatever you want. The price is only some piece of the world he cannot turn away. They brought me photographs, rings, medals, heirlooms, each one with a wish attached. Send my mother up, though she drank herself into the grave. Let me see my brother again. Reserve a place for my son, who isn't even dead yet. And each one came with something real, something that smelled and weighed and gleamed, something a hungry spirit couldn't push away. I didn't take them all. I want that on the record. I sent hundreds away, told them to keep their treasures and face their judgment as they should. But some I couldn't refuse. And every one I took was a soul whose path I bent, and an object I kept for myself. There was the old man who brought his dog's collar. Buster was the only one who ever loved me unconditionally, he said. Truth. The pages were white. I'm not asking for anything for myself, but promise me he'll be waiting for me up there, that I won't walk those streets alone. I took the collar and promised a dog I had no power to promise. There was the child. God, the children were the worst. Who brought her favorite toy, a stuffed rabbit worn down to almost nothing. She held it out to me with both hands, like an offering. "Mommy cries all the time," she said. "When Mommy comes here, will you let her into the place where I am? Even if she did something bad. Bunny is the payment. He's the most precious thing I have." How could I refuse? I took the rabbit, and I gave the child a promise she carried into the elevator, and to myself went one more piece of the world. Every object went into my drawer. Every yes made the next one easier. And with each one I told myself the same story. This wasn't Webb. Webb had been selfishness. These were love, a mother, a brother, a dog, a reunion. I wasn't selling heaven to greed. I was granting mercy to longing. That's how I framed it to myself. But it was a lie, and its heart was simple. I didn't take the objects for the wishes. I took the wishes for the objects. The watch, the collar, the rabbit, the ring, they were real, and I was hungry, and every bent judgment was just the price I paid to keep a piece of the world. The drawer grew fuller. The watch ticked louder, and I began to change. It started small. I found myself looking forward to the arrival of certain souls. The interesting ones. The ones who might bring something special. I began to see the objects before the souls. A flash of metal, a glint of color. Something real in this endlessly gray place. Then came the morning I arrived early to count my collection. I laid each object on my desk. The silver stapler that had started it all. 17 photographs, 9 rings, 6 watches, Sarah Chen's among them, 4 military medals, 3 lockets, 2 pairs of glasses, 1 dog collar, 1 stuffed rabbit, and a rosary made of jade. I arranged them and admired how the fluorescent light played across their surfaces. When the father spoke. "Gatekeeper." I swept everything back into the drawer with guilty haste. "Yes, Father, your behavior has been noted." The office turned cold. Not the mild chill of air conditioning, but the deep, bone-aching cold of absolute zero, of the space between stars, of the void before creation. "I've shown only mercy," I said quickly. "Everyone I helped did it out of love. A mother, a child, the widow. I sold nothing to selfishness." "Mercy," the father repeated, and I heard in his voice something I'd never heard before. Disappointment. "You call it mercy, but there is a law older than you, and it binds you. A spirit of judgment must covet nothing material. You covet, Gatekeeper. I have seen your drawer. I have seen what you're becoming. I only keep them. You hoard. You possess. You covet the mammon you were forbidden even to touch." The word struck like a physical blow. I wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't greed, it was love, mercy, longing. But even in my own mind, the explanations rang hollow. "Stop this," the father commanded. "No more objects, no more drawer, no more promises you have no right to make. This is your final warning. Do you understand?" "I understand, Father. The next transgression will carry consequences." The cold withdrew, leaving me trembling at my desk. I opened the drawer, stared at my collection. I should have thrown it all away right then. Should have flung every piece into the bin and gone back to the clean simplicity of question and answer, truth and lie, up and down. But the watch ticked. The rabbit's button eye gleamed. The photographs whispered of lives lived and lost. I closed the drawer. For months, perhaps years. Time blurs in the office. I reformed. I became the perfect gatekeeper once more. Souls arrived. I asked my questions. They answered. They went on their way. Up or down, heaven or hell, No negotiations, no exceptions. The objects they brought stayed with them. Their wishes remained their own. The father said nothing, but I felt his approval like warm sunlight. I was good again, pure again. The system worked as it was meant to. But virtue built on fear is like ice over deep water. It holds until it doesn't. Her name was Margaret Price, age 94, cause of death, peacefully in her sleep. She approached my desk with the careful dignity of someone who'd lived through wars and depressions and private tragedies without ever quite breaking. Her soul wore a simple dress and sturdy shoes, and her hands clutched a small jewelry box. "Mrs. Price," I said, scanning the book. "Your question is, have you ever stolen?" She smiled softly, full of secret knowledge. "Yes, once, during the war. I stole bread to feed my children when their father didn't come home." The pages turned white. Truth. The elevator chimed, the golden doors opened. She set the jewelry box on my desk. "Mrs. Price, I can't." "I know about your collection," she said quietly. "The watch that ticks, the rabbit with one eye, the collar that still faintly smells of dog. And I know what others ask of you in exchange. The dead talk, Gatekeeper. Even before we arrive here, we talk." My breath. Do I even breathe anymore? I must, because it caught in my throat. "Then what is it you're asking?" "Nothing." She looked at me calmly. "Not a place above, not a reunion, not a wish. My husband and I will go where we deserve, and that's enough for us. Open the box." I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. The father had been clear. But my hands moved without my permission, lifted the little brass clasp, raised the lid. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay the most beautiful collection of jewelry I'd ever seen. Not valuable. These weren't diamonds or gold. They were cheap costume pieces, glass and brass and painted metal. But each had been chosen with care, worn with love, treasured beyond its worth. A brooch shaped like a butterfly, earrings like drops of frozen sky, a necklace of false pearls that somehow looked more real than real ones. "My husband gave me one piece every anniversary," Mrs. Price said. 47 years. He couldn't afford much, but he never missed a year, not once. Even the year he was dying, he had the nurse help him order something from a catalogue. I can't take them with me. The material doesn't survive the crossing. But I can't bear the thought that they'll simply vanish, as though they and everything they meant had never been. I only ask that something beautiful be allowed to remain. That's all. And there it was. No wish, no judgment to bend, not even an excuse to hide behind. Only a beautiful thing I could keep. And I took it. Not out of mercy, not out of love, for no reason at all except that I wanted it. If I had been honest with myself in that moment, I would have known the truth. I was no longer a gatekeeper, no longer a giver of mercy. I was just a hunger dressed in a uniform. "One last time," I whispered, and took the box. Mrs. Price smiled, touched my hand. Her fingers were like whispers against my skin, and walked into the elevator. As the doors closed, she called out, "Thank you for keeping love alive." The box went into my drawer with the others. The watch ticked in approval. The rabbit's button eye winked. And somewhere, in the space between heartbeats, I felt the universe shift. When the father's voice came, it was not the thunder I expected. It was worse. It was quiet. It was resigned. It was the voice of a parent who has discovered their child is exactly who they feared they were. Gatekeeper. I didn't try to hide the jewelry box. There was no point. He knew. He had always known. You were warned. Father, You were given a final warning. And this is how you answer it. The office began to change. The fluorescent lights flickered and dimmed. The endless rows of desks began to fade. The comfortable mundanity of bureaucracy peeled away like old paint, revealing something ancient and terrible beneath. Please, Father, everything I did out of love. Not for myself, never. A mother, a child, a widow. They loved, and I gave them mercy. And there, as I spoke my own defense, I heard it ring hollow. But the Father heard it before I did. Marcus Webb, the Father said. The name dropped into the office like a stone into a well. Where was the love in that? The Father asked. A polished emptiness. A man the book could not decide, so the choice was yours. And you had chosen the depths. Until he showed you chrome. He now walks the halls of heaven, to which he has no right because you wanted a stapler. Not love, not mercy, only hunger. That was your first sin, and it laid bare all the others. Silence. I couldn't say a word. You tell yourself the widow bought love a reunion, the Father went on. But you took the watch because you couldn't let it go. You tell yourself the child bought her mother the light. But you took the rabbit because it was real and you were hungry. You did not take the objects for the wishes, Gatekeeper. You took the wishes for the objects. Every bent judgment was only the price you paid to keep a piece of the world. I thought... You broke the oldest law, the Father said, and there was no anger left in his voice now, only that terrible, weary sorrow. A spirit of judgment must covet nothing material. You coveted mammon, and for it you sold justice, soul by soul. You were impartial, incorruptible, a perfect instrument of justice, and you sold it for chrome and gold. And worse, he continued, you promised what you have no power to give. The widow gave her only treasure so her husband might walk into the light. The child gave the thing she loved most for her mother's sake. You took their gifts and gave them promises of smoke in return. For soon you will no longer stand at the gate, and not one of those doors will be yours to open. They paid everything for nothing. The words weighed more than any punishment could have. The system was built on trust, the Father said. The souls trusted that their judgment was fair. Those who gave you their treasures trusted your promises. And I trusted you. The past tense of that last word struck harder than anything else. You want mammon, the Father said. You want the material world. Then you shall have it. But not as you imagined. The book on my desk began to change. Its leather covers cracked and aged in an instant, the pages yellowing and curling. The golden script that revealed each soul's question faded to black. And then, in letters that seemed to burn themselves into the paper, new words appeared. Your sentence. From this moment on, the Father intoned, you are no longer the gatekeeper. You shall be death itself. You will not judge souls. That privilege is lost to you who abused it. Instead, you will collect them. You will walk the earth, entering hospitals and homes, accident scenes and battlefields. You will take the hands of the dying and lead them to their destinations. Their paths are already set by their lives. You are only the escort. I felt my body change. The comfortable suit I'd worn for centuries began to darken. its threads reweaving into something older, more solemn, more final. My hands grew cold, so cold that frost formed on the desk where I touched it. "But Father, your task is eternal," he went on, not hearing or not caring. "You will never rest, never cease, never know peace. The objects you coveted, you will see millions of them clutched in dying hands, but you will never be able to keep a single one. They will slip through your fingers like smoke. You coveted mammon. Now you will stand among it forever, touching it and never owning it. You will thirst and never drink. That is the price of the law." The jewelry box on my desk began to darken and rust. The watch's ticking slowed, then stopped. The rabbit's button eye split and fell away. "And yet," the father said, and there was something almost like pity in his voice now, "I am not without mercy. Once a year you will have a single day, 24 hours, to walk among the living as one of them, to remember what you've lost, to taste food, to feel warmth, to experience the material world you craved so desperately. One day. One day. And there is one other provision. If you find a soul willing to take your place, to accept the burden of death of their own free will and knowingly, you may pass on your role and finally rest. They must agree to 5 years of mortal life, knowing that at the end they will become what you are now." I laughed. It was a bitter sound, like wind through empty graves. Who would ever agree to that? "That," the father said, "is for you to discover." The office completed its transformation. The desks vanished. The fluorescent lights went out. I stood in a space that was everywhere and nowhere, on the threshold between life and what comes after. A key materialized in my hand, not gold, not silver, but something that seemed made of condensed twilight, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "This key," the father explained, "opens the path for each soul. You do not choose the direction. That is already determined. You only unlock the way." I looked at my collection one last time. Everything crumbled to dust. The silver stapler, Sarah Chen's watch, Mrs. Price's jewelry, the rabbit, the collar, all of it dissolving like sugar in rain. "Your first assignment awaits," the father said. "Room 314, St. Mary's Hospital. A child, leukemia. She's been fighting for 3 years." "A child?" My voice broke. "You're sending me to collect a child?" Death does not discriminate, Gatekeeper. That is a lesson you should have learned long ago. And then I was there, standing in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and false hope. Machines beeped steadily, marking a time I could no longer truly feel. In the bed lay a girl, perhaps 7 years old, surrounded by stuffed animals and get-well cards. Her parents sat on either side of her, holding her hands, whispering promises they couldn't keep. I waited. Death always waits. At 3:47 a.m., the machines began to sing their swan song. The parents cried out for nurses. Doctors rushed in with their equipment and their desperate measures. But I knew, as I would always know from that moment on, that their time was up. The girl's soul separated from her body, like light passing through water. She saw me at once. The dead always do. And her eyes went wide. "Are you an angel?" she asked. "No," I said, and my voice was gentler than I expected. "I'm just the one who walks with you to the next place. Will it hurt?" "No, never again." She looked back at her body, at her parents' grief, at the doctor still fighting the inevitable. Can't I stay? Just a little longer. Tomorrow's my birthday. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a soul begging for time, while I had all the time in existence and wanted none of it. But the key in my hand grew warm, insistent. The path had to be opened. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. But where you're going, every day is a celebration. Is that true? I slid the key into the air itself and turned it in a lock that existed between heartbeats. A door opened. Golden light for her, of course it would be golden for a child so pure. And she gasped in wonder. It's beautiful, she whispered. Yes, I agreed, though I could see only the threshold, never what lay beyond. It is. She took my hand. Her fingers were like butterfly wings against my Arctic skin. And together we walked through. On the other side she let go, running towards something I couldn't see, her laughter trailing behind her like scattered pearls. The door closed. The key grew cold again. I stood in the hospital room, invisible now to the grieving parents, the exhausted doctors. The machines had fallen silent. Time of death was called. And somewhere else, another soul was preparing to leave its body, and I would be there, key in hand, the path waiting to be opened. This was my existence now, not judging, only escorting, not choosing, only opening doors I could never pass through myself. The ultimate irony for one who had hoarded earthly treasures. I would handle thousands of souls and keep none of them. As I left the hospital, fading from one deathbed to appear at another, I thought about the Father's punishment. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Was it just? Probably. Was it eternal? That remained to be seen. Because he had given me that one provision, that single thread of hope, someone could take my place. Someone could choose this burden. It seemed impossible. But then, I had once thought it impossible that anyone would try to bribe their way into heaven with a stapler. And against all expectation, that attempt had succeeded. The universe, I was learning, had a very dark sense of humor. But those are stories for another time. For now, know this. Every death you've ever heard of, every passing you've ever mourned, every last breath ever drawn, I was there. I'm always there, waiting with my key, opening the door, watching souls walk to destinations I set in motion with my greed, my weakness, my very human desire to hold on to something real in a place that was never meant to be anything but fleeting. The watch doesn't tick anymore. The rabbit has no eyes. The jewelry has turned to dust. Somewhere in the golden halls of heaven walks a hollow man down streets he bought with a silver stapler. And somewhere on earth, a man still lives who doesn't know his bride gave away her only treasure for a promise I can never keep. But I remember them. I remember them all. Oh, how I remember. And that, perhaps, is the cruelest punishment of all. End of episode 1.